Well, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to welcome you to today's Zoom meeting. My name is Barry Cowan. I've been the president of the Deerfield Beach Computer Club since 2005, now in my 18th year. Boy, try and beat that record, folks. Want to wish happy Passover to all of the Jewish people here and happy Easter for the upcoming Sunday for those who are not. We wish our snowbirds good health and a safe trip to their destination. They're all starting to leave Century Village and the surrounding areas. I announced earlier that Apple's having its Worldwide Development Conference on June 5th to 9th, where they're going to introduce iOS 17 for all of your devices and possibly some other surprises. We just don't know yet. There's a lot of rumors circulating, but mark that down. Monday, June 5th will be the keynote address given by Tim Cook. Some of it will be virtual, other will be live for the first time. We seem to be going away from the pandemic type operation. However, our particular membership has chosen to remain with Zoom, at least for the time being. We've been doing this since June of 2020. And I just flew in from Chicago, and boy, are my arms tired, let me tell you.
Oh, joke.
Right. So what I'm going to do is introduce today's guest speaker, Sue Mueller. I believe I pronounced it right.
Correct.
Sue is widely considered to be APCUG's expert on genealogy. And I'll let her start by telling you a little bit about herself. And so anytime you're ready, Sue, you can share.
Okay. My background was as an educator, so and I've been working on genealogy probably about 30 years. So I decided some years ago to combine my love of teaching with genealogy, and I've been teaching classes at our local library once a month. So I have a variety of topics that I can cover. And I do not claim to be an expert. Every time I research to do a class, I learn something new. So it's an ongoing process. But I will share my screen here.
And I'll mute everybody. And I have to make you a co-host.
I think you must have already, because I'm sharing. Whoops.
Oh, let me do that for you before we have a problem here. Okay, you are now a co-host with sharing privileges.
Okay. You do see my screen, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay, let's get started then. Well, sometimes it doesn't want me to get started. Mark Twain had a little advice for us as far as genealogy is concerned, which could save you some money. If you go into politics, your opponents will find out all about your background and save you a lot of effort. So what I'm going to talk about today is how to get started, whether you should use software or not. And the short answer is yes. How much information you can find at the library. You're probably going to want to start with census records. And then there are a lot of free internet resources out there. And since we're computer club members, I'm going to tell you how our computer club saves us some money. And then I will talk a little bit about social media, because I know some of us are a little bit afraid of that. Whoops. All of a sudden my screen went away. And it can be very helpful in your pursuit of finding information about your family. This picture was taken in 1947. I'm that little girl. Everyone else in the picture, of course, is gone. So my recommendation for you is to start today, because the longer you wait, the more things are going to be lost. Putting names on pictures, for instance, you probably have a whole box full of pictures and you have no idea who those people are, or you might have a limited idea, but
I didn't get a slide change. I'm still on the list. Everybody else there?
Yeah, it shows session outline. Is that the one that you wanted
No.
as your slide? Okay, you need to move it then. Okay.
I did move. You don't see, you see the next slide now?
No,
Well, that's weird because I'm seeing it.
we don't see it here for some
Okay,
reason.
let me do a new share here. Wait a
Okay,
minute. Oh, it says, wait a minute. It says it's paused. Let me see. I never saw, I didn't do anything. Oh, okay, now do you see the picture of my grandparent, no, it still says paused. Wait a minute.
right.
How do I make it? Well, let me stop the share and start and do it again.
Right.
Oops. Okay, now do you see the picture?
You're not sharing.
Oh, I stopped this. Wait a minute. Now I've completely lost my bar for, okay. Share screen. Now.
Okay, we're back in. Gotcha. All right, now you just
Okay.
have to go to that first slide there. There you go.
Okay, there
We got it.
Okay. I must have bumped something that anyway. Okay, the records are destroyed on purpose or accidentally, and then people pass away and their stories are gone. I'm trying to write down as many of my grandparents' stories as I can, because those will be completely gone if I don't write them down. So even if you're not interested in genealogy, you can do some things to help those who are interested. So you have stuff. It might be pictures, it might be documents, whatever. Organize what you have. It will be less confusing to you if you always consider name women by their maiden names. The only thing I have not done consistently in my work is with adoptions. I do that on a case by case thing, because I try to use the name that the person was known by for most of their lifetime, and sometimes that's the birth name, and sometimes it's the name after they're adopted. So that's up to you what you want to do. Your research is probably going to start with the census, but I don't want you to forget that bigger historical picture, because that will have a huge impact on what your ancestors did, where they went, who they went with, that kind of thing. And sadly, I can tell you that sometimes even what is supposed to be a primary record can be incorrect. So you want to label what you have, but you want to, every time you get information, you need to source it. And that's one of the beauties of using software, is because if you have a document that you merge into your software, it automatically will source it for you, and you don't have to worry about putting the record information in. Record accurately. It's going to be difficult sometimes to read the documents, because they are going to be in cursive writing, and I don't know what the current youth are going to do as far as that's concerned, but that's not going to be our problem. You want to look at the original document. There is often more information on the document itself than your software, or if you have an online tree and you're using that app, then that will merge into, and it will be good for you. Sometimes things have been indexed incorrectly, transcribed incorrectly. I'm recommending that you digitize as much as you can, because I don't know if this is going to be news to you, but your kids don't want your stuff. And chances are they're going to throw away some things that maybe even in later years they'll wish they had. But if you have it digitized, they are more likely to hang on to those digital copies than the actual copies. choose software. There are some problems if you choose the wrong software, and there's no such thing as wrong software, but it's related to saving your documents and making changes that I want to talk about. Right now, Roots Magic and Family Tree Maker will sync with Ancestry. That means if you find a document in Ancestry, it'll automatically merge it into your software, which makes it very nice. Legacy software syncs with MyHeritage. The problem with changing the software is any document that you've attached will not come over to your new software without you doing the documents by hand. There's a universal talking language of genealogical software, which creates a GEDCOM file. And all that attaches is names, dates, notes, information, anything, typed kinds of things. But any audio files, pictures, or source files, the documents themselves do not come over. So if you decided to switch software, it would be a cumbersome process for you. And you know, your tree is going to get, you start working on this and you think about how many people you're going to have in your tree. Even if you didn't have a big family, you've got a lot of ancestors and you're hoping to find them back generations. And then you get interesting stories that kind of are off your direct line, and you get those people in there and you end up with thousands of people. So what's going to make your research really interesting, especially to people who aren't necessarily interested in the names, dates, those kinds of things, is if you include your family stories. So if you are lucky enough to have older people in your family record, you can use your phone for that. You can have video and a recording of somebody telling their story, but you can also write down those stories. And every family has stories that have probably been embellished over the years, if not totally made up. So you're going to try and verify those with some historical records, maybe newspapers, you know, what happened, was your ancestor in the right place for that to have happened. All of the current software packages will allow you to attach audio files as well as video files and regular documents. But identify what you have. My mother was the champion newspaper clipper. She could clip an article so close that you couldn't see anything around it. And then she would write 11/9 on it. Is that the day of the newspaper article? Is that a month and a year? Is that a month and a day? What newspaper is this from? It was so frustrating for me to try and find things. So on the case of pictures, who, when, where you want to have on the picture, and include a last name because you think you'll never forget these people, but you will. If you're lucky enough to have letters, hopefully it's still in the envelope. If it's not, then that makes it a little bit harder because people often did not put actually a year on the letter. And then the letter could say, "Dear son," and be "Love, Dad." So you need to identify who son was, who dad was on the letter, on the envelope. If you're lucky enough to have a Bible where records were kept, and you decide, well, geez, I don't want to save this old Bible, it's falling apart, but I do want to save, you know, the listing of the deaths and marriages. You need to save the title page also, because a Bible that, let's say you have a 1940 Bible that has 1880 records in it, that's not going to be that won't meet a genealogical standard of proof. It needs to be written close to the time of the actual event. And in the case of stories, you need to identify the who, the when, the why, the where, that kind of thing. So just for your own information, And you're probably curious about when things become public record and when could I find them and are they going to be online, that kind of thing. By law, the census is not released until 72 years after the census. They have arbitrarily chosen April the 1st as the census date. That was not always the day of the census, but and the census now is being has been indexed by artificial intelligence. And most of the major sites that indexed the census records, they did not have them in their hands until April the 1st, the 1950 census, April the 1st in 2022, and they had them indexed within 9 days. The genealogical standard for when things become public record, this does not mean, this is no law. This is the generally accepted standard. Death certificates become public after 50 years. That does not mean that states are going to voila, put them online for you to see or have them readily available to you. And it doesn't mean that your state or the state you're interested in follows that standard. So that may vary from Colorado used to be 100 years, and I don't know if they've changed that because I eventually found out the information I wanted to get from that death certificate I was seeking from Colorado. This generally accepted standard for birth certificates is 105 years before they become public record. Marriage records and wills, once they've been probated, are public records on the spot. And that's even if somebody doesn't want their marriage information put in the newspaper, it still is public record at the courthouse. So you could actually go down to the courthouse and look those records up right up to date. I love the library. I think I had my first library card when I was 7 years old, and you can find out all kinds of good stuff at libraries. And they may be at city, county, or university libraries. The universities, a lot of universities have started to digitize state newspapers. So that can be a gold mine for you. Most libraries have links to genealogy, local genealogy sites or anything online. Many of them have subscriptions. Some are only for patrons only, which requires a library card. Our library, for instance, subscribes to Newsbank and Fold 3. Fold 3 is Newsbank is a newspaper site, and Fold 3 is a military record site. And we can access those from home. Most libraries have a in-house ancestry subscription. It's a library subscription, so it's a little different than having your own. And they also subscribe to American Ancestors, but that varies from library to library. Some libraries have obituary indexes, local marriage indexes. We have a local library that has cemetery records, and they're done from the cemetery records themselves, not from a cemetery reading, which of course is more accurate because some people don't have stones, or the stones have deteriorated over the years so that you can't find them or they don't exist anymore. So some of the other things that they might have in-house subscriptions, they will usually have newspapers on microfilm, and those will be local newspapers. I always start my search when I'm looking at indexes, local kinds of indexes, with a surname only, because sometimes then that will give me the names of siblings I might not even have known existed, or married names for some of the daughters, or a maiden name for one of the son's wives, that kind of thing. So if it's a very common name, obviously that's not going to be a very good strategy. So I mentioned the word primary source before, but I want to make sure you understand what that is. That's created at the time of the event. And so the closer that something occurs or the document is created as closest to the time that of the actual happening, the more likely it is to be correct. That doesn't mean that it is correct, but it's more likely to be correct. A secondary source is created after the event. So it might be years after the event. There might be analysis there. There might be interpretation. And sadly, it seems that birth date really wasn't that important to our ancestors. It's not that they were liars. It's just that you look at the draft notice or draft registration for the World War I and the World War II. If somebody actually appears in both of them, sometimes they have a different year for their birth date, and it's usually just 1 year difference. It's because that wasn't that important. My great-great-grandfather was a school teacher, so you would have to think that he was at least as smart as the average bear. And on his marriage certificate or license application, when it asked for his birth year, he wrote, "Don't know." And truly, most of the primary sources for his information are wrong, because I know when he was born, because he appears on the 1860 census as 1 year old. The 1860 census is dated September 3rd. His birthday was September 17th. And obviously he would not have been on that census had he not been born the year before. But many of what we consider to be primary records, like his death certificate, say he was born in 1860, which is not accurate. So you need to evaluate the source of whatever you have. So where did the information come from? On the case of a death certificate, for instance, who was the informant? If your ancestor died in a hospital or an institution, and it was the person, the director of the institution, who signs as the informant, it's less likely to be accurate than a family member. Let's say in the case where a mother or grandmother passed away, her spouse is the most likely to know the information, the accurate information. You will get maiden names, different maiden names, or slightly different, on the various children's birth certificates, even though they had the same mother, because sometimes they just don't know the information. And remember, in the case of a death, people are upset at the time of the death, and they may know the information, yet that it doesn't just pop into their heads when they're being asked. And rather than say, well, I don't know what town my mother was born in, they will name the town that they think it was. And so that might not be accurate. But is there a reason to lie? In the case of a marriage, is a woman a lot older than the husband, so she's lied about her age, so she makes herself younger? Or were the couple too young to be married and they lie about their age, make themselves older? To join the military, people lied about their ages in order to work, or if you have committed a crime. So look even at the records that you purport to be primary and should be accurate. They may not necessarily be so. So to avoid mistakes, and everybody makes them, you need to verify those family stories as best you can with historical records, newspaper articles, those kinds of things. I know you're going to be shocked to learn that things you see in print or on the internet are not always reliable. And you want to document your sources, even if you have conflicting information. And then you're going to try and decide which one is the most credible. You may not make the right decisions. Remember, transcriptions can be grossly inaccurate. So you want to look at the original documents wherever possible. And more original documents are becoming available online so that you can do your work from home. do you want to have an online family tree? I think you do, because this is going to give you an opportunity to connect with family members or people that you might not have known before, to find pictures of others. And if you want people to share with you, obviously you need to be willing to share what you have. Most genealogical software, if you're working in software, will allow you to privatize any documents that you don't want to share the document itself. For instance, I have my parents' death certificates, which are not real recent, but more recent than the general standard of, and I have those privatized. The DNA connection, every place that you can test tells you they're not responsible if you find out something you didn't want to know, or something that just blows your mind about what your ancestors were all about, or even who they were. You may find people have pictures and know stories that you never heard about your family, and that enriches your information also. There are free places you can put your family tree, and there are for fee sites. That doesn't mean one is better than the other, but for instance, Ancestry is a subscription site, but you can put your family tree up there for free. Some of them restrict the size of the tree that you can put online for free, because I know I'm going to shock you to learn, but all these people that have these sites are after your money. They want to figure a way that you can be paying them forever. When I first started this, I used to say Wiki was not your friend, but I'm going to modify that now. I will say that a wiki is not always your friend. By definition, a wiki of any kind is a cooperative effort. So there are family trees on some sites that are wikis. What this means is that you put your information up, but other people can make changes to your family tree. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't have any problem making mistakes. I don't need help making mistakes. So I would rather be on a site where somebody contacts me and say, I don't think what you have is correct. Let's, talk about it, or let me try and convince you why you're wrong. But I don't want somebody to go in and make changes in my tree, because I wouldn't even know what was changed. So I mentioned before that you're probably going to start with the census record, and maybe all of you are old enough that you're in the 1950 census. But the census actually started back in 1790, and it was every 10 years. And those censuses do exist, except for the 1890 census, which is, of course, is right when your grandparents were probably doing something, and you need those records. Some states even had their own censuses, and that can help you too, because sometimes they ask different information. But you're going to start basically with the 1950 census and work backwards and follow your family back. I will tell you that there's not a glitch necessarily, but the way that the software works is, if you're going to merge, let's say, a census document into your software or into your tree, they merge anybody that's listed on the census in that family only if you are merging from the parents. If you merge from the child, they will only merge the two parents and the child. They will not merge siblings. So if you're trying to get the whole family members, and you don't even have to type it, because it merges and it puts the people in your tree. You want to do that merging from the parents. But if you're on a census that says where, and one of the questions is asked is where your parents were born, then it will also merge into the parents, because the parents, even though they're not named there, the parents of whoever's on the census, So be careful with that, because you will be merging then censuses into people that aren't actually on that census. So I've probably said this 4 or 5 times, and I'll probably say it a half a dozen times more. You always want to look at the original document. It can be indexed or transcribed incorrectly. There can be lots of good information that you want to look at, and all the facts that are on the document are not merged. For instance, occupation is one of the things that's almost always asked on the census, and that information does not come into your software, although it's something you may be interested in. And if you have an ancestor who had a fairly common name, it may help you sort out which one is your ancestor, because you knew that he was a blacksmith, for instance. Also, it might, as you look down the page on that census, you may see names of in-laws or neighbors or people that are other family members that you've been hunting for. It will also, because it gives you an exact date, it may help, and I'm talking about month and day, it'll help you figuring out when somebody's birth was, or exactly what their age is. The problem is that the census takers were told to provide the census information was to be as of the census date, the date that was assigned as census day, not the date it was taken. So some census takers did that, and some census takers did, everybody was in the household at the day that they were there. So that can be a little problem with the date on the census. Probably the biggest free site, the genealogy free site, is familysearch.org, and that's the Mormon site, the Church of the Latter-day Saints. Everything they have on there is free. Their search engine has improved, but it's still not as good as, say, Ancestry's or MyHeritage. So you will get more results than you want, and you'll get more results that are completely unrelated to what you want. If you're too restrictive, then you'll eliminate some results that are good. And I'll give you an example. My grandfather's name was William Albert Bowser, and I was pretty sure that I was going to be able to find his marriage license application online. He was born or married in 1903, because other ones from the county were there. So I did a search, William Albert Bowser, and the name of his bride, and I didn't get anything. And so then because I was pretty much convinced that I should get something, I did a search for the primary person being my grandmother, whose name was Desi Geiger, and the marriage license was W.A. Bowser, so for my grandfather. So that's why it didn't show up. So that's just an example of how, when I had too much information there, it just and that wasn't on the document, that it didn't show up. Family search, the Mormons they're very interested in family history, and they are trying to digitize everything that they have. And of course, they can digitize faster than they can index. So they do have a catalog search, which is not the default. The default is for records. The catalog includes things that they have digitized, but they have not indexed yet. And while the searching is cumbersome, it can be a great resource. One of the frustrating things about using the catalog is sometimes some of the things that they have are only available at a family history center or a family history library. They used to lend microfilm to libraries. Your library could request a microfilm, but they don't do that anymore. But most of us live there. those family history centers are usually at their churches, and they are all over the country. They're not so far away. They're open at weird times, so you'd have to check locally. And the people that work there are volunteers, so they're usually pretty helpful. This is the search. The default is the green arrow for records. The red arrow is the catalog search. Another great free site is Find a Grave. It's a worldwide database of tombstones, cemetery information. It's totally done by volunteers. That doesn't mean that only volunteers make mistake. I don't, that line that says may have errors. Everything that you're looking to look at may have errors. If you become a member, which is free, that will allow you to make corrections or requests on memorials. So let's say you have an ancestor who's buried in Vermont, and you think, I'll never get to Vermont, but I'd really like to see that tombstone. You can place a request, and some volunteer will go and take a picture for you. And there's all kinds of stuff on there. I just want to tell you a little story about my great-grandfather. You've all seen tombstones where you know that the birth year is incorrect, but I think we all figure the death year, that should be right? Well, no. James died January 3rd, 1908. Do you know how hard it was for me to find a death certificate for him or any information when I was trying to, looking at newspapers from 1907, because I didn't have an actual date. And so in the stonecutter's defense, it was only 3 days into the new year, but still it was wrong. I ultimately replaced that tombstone. And I did that for two reasons. Number one, I wanted it to be correct. But number two, his wife, my great-grandmother, was buried in an unmarked grave in another county. So I wanted a mark on this earth that said she was there. And I will tell you that about the same time that I was doing this stone, my parents had passed away, and I did a stone for them. The stone cutters will cut you a break on the price of replacing historical stones. I paid about half what I paid for my parents, and it was because of the cutting of the price for historical stones. So just something that if you've thought about doing that, there are ways to avoid that the cost may not be as high as you had thought it might be. So what can you find on Find a Grave? And remember, all this information is just provided by volunteers like you and me. You could find birth and death dates and places of birth and death date. It has the ability to link to parents and children and siblings, and pictures of the tombstone. Sometimes people add pictures of the person. Sometimes somebody will add an obituary or a death certificate. And a newer thing that you're going to find, which is really great, is you may even have a GPS location for the grave site, which is really great, because then you can take out your phone, you can walk right to the spot in the cemetery where it is if you are going yourself. But that's relatively new, so you're not going to find it on every site. I want to mention, because I spent a lot of time in my life trying to figure out when someone was born based on the death date, where the tombstone said years, months, and days. And that was fairly common in the late 1800s, early 1900s. As there are all kinds of age calculators online, and you save yourself a little bit of work. Cindy's list is like a great big card catalog. And when she first started, all her links were to free sites. That's not the case now, but the sites that are not free are plainly marked as subscriptions. But she also makes every effort to keep this site up to date. So if you find a dead link, she wants to know about it. If you find a link she doesn't have that you think is good, she wants to know about that also. So she does maintain what she has, and you can search by topic. You can't search by names. It's just links to where you can find stuff where you can search by names. This is a wonderful site that seems that not a lot of people know about. You notice I have the word "the," and by the way, the handout's all hyperlinked, so I hope nobody's running around trying to write all this stuff down. So everything I talk about is on the handout. But I have the in red because there's another site, ancestorhunt.com, which isn't this site, and it doesn't have all this good stuff. But not only does this site have links to various resources where you can search, but it also has how-tos and suggestions for searching. And it has coroner's records and things that you don't commonly find on other sites. It's probably more divorce records in a single place than any other site, although divorce records are less likely to be online than some other records. We tend to think that passenger lists don't exist for way back when, but they actually exist, right back to the colonial period. But the passenger list was generally something the captain wrote down, a list of people who were on the ship. So it just may be a family unit, and it may just have the name of the head of household, and then it might say, 2 females, that kind of thing. So it might not be as good as you'd like it to be. The information got better. It was a little more organized if they came through the port of New York. I think Castle Garden opened in 1855. And then Ellis Island opened in 1893, and then the ship manifest, there was an entry for each person on the ship manifest. But if somebody was born or died on the ship, that's going to be in the back of the manifest book. And the manifest ship are generally 2 pages. So when you do a search on any site, you're only going to get the first page with the name on it. So be sure and look at the next page because there's lots more information. You want to hope that your ancestor came in 1906 forward, because then that was the best information, because they asked where you came from in the old country, a name of a town, and who the contact person was in the old person, and then where you were going in the United States, including the name of the town and a name of a contact person there if you had one. So that can be very rich in information. And I will also mention, and I think this is on the handout, that MyHeritage is the only site that I know of that has indexed those passenger lists with the other names. In other words, the non-immigrant name on them. In other words, where they were going or who they were going to. And they do have a free video that you can watch that tells what they have done. And of course, they want you to subscribe to their site. But I'm just telling you that they're the only ones so far that have done that. Yeah, the Port of New York, Castle Gardens was where they came in before. Everybody didn't come in through New York. There were lots of other ports of entry. I recommend, and they've changed the searching on Castle Garden and Ellis Island. So I recommend that you do your searching through the stevemorse.org site. He has other things besides immigration records on there, and it's plainly marked if it's a subscription site. Mostly the links that he has that are on subscription sites are on Ancestry. But you can, for instance, the Castle Garden and Ellis Island, you can no longer search by sounds like, which you can still do on the Steve Morse site. If you want to actually see the documents, you're going to have to have a Castle Garden or Ellis Island free account, and they're going to try and sell you a lovely, frameable thing for $29, but you can see the document for free. So he has the Social Security Death Index on there and other searches that you can do. So that's a really good free site for you to use. I mentioned about the Social Security Death Index. The law says that Social Security death records can be released 3 years after the death of the person. The truth is that actually it's through February of 2014. Ancestry uses that they have them through March, but it's the end of February. They began keeping those records in 1962, but they're not very complete. They become almost complete in the 1980s, and they began to be totally complete when we started a process called enumeration at birth, which meant that when you got a social, or when you were born, you got a Social Security number. So those records starting in the 1990s, they're more likely to be everybody that passed away is in that death index. It is my gut feeling, and this is totally Sue Muller's opinion, I don't think the Social Security Death Index may not be released again because of the whole thing of identity theft. I may be wrong about that, but look, they're already several years behind in the release. It hasn't happened, so I don't know that it's going to happen. That's just my opinion. I will tell you, though, that the place name for death, which you think is a place name for death, because it'll say, I give a place name and the date of death, is not the date of death, or not the place of death. It's the address that Social Security has on record. So you people that have a home in Florida or a home in Arizona, and you actually live in New York State, that's probably where your bank is, and that's probably where the Social Security's record of you. But if you pass away in your winter home, that's not going to be noted there. So do not take the information on the death index for place name as where the person died. You need to actually investigate that. This is a really neat site. That's a worldwide cooperative effort of major newspapers and funeral homes. And so you can find recent obituaries on here from 2000 forward. They used to have more stuff on this site, but this is what they have now. I don't know if they are continuing to reduce the size of the old obituaries, but at one time they were doing that. But they never take off the name of the funeral home because that, as I mentioned, is a cooperative effort of those two, of newspapers and funeral homes. So with the funeral home name, you can probably find the obituary. Most funeral homes, if they have posted an online obituary, they're not taking it off. So they have kept those old ones are still there. You always need, when you're doing a search on this site, always go for more options, because I think the default is to search an obituary for the last 3 days. So you do a pull down and you can search all, or if you know when the death occurred, you can put, and you can restrict it by state. If you put in a middle name, the problem there is that they're going to give you records that where what you think is the middle name is the first name. So you might want to start with the real name, just first without any extra information.
I see a new member has joined us, Sue.
Oh, well, then they'll be happy that you're recording.
Well, if she barks or whatever, I'll know. She got right into your screen. Okay.
So where can you find obituaries? Funeral homes, as I mentioned, they often post them online. People are getting cheap now, and they're not putting as many complete obituaries in the newspapers. Newspapers charged by the column inch, but The library sites sometimes have an obituary index. It just, varies from place to place. You can do a Google search for a name plus an obituary and see what you find. Just be creative when you do your searching. And not everybody who's doing good research is on one of the subscription sites like Ancestry or MyHeritage. They may just have a website that has a family history or their family tree on the website, and that's the only place it is. So pick a name in your genealogy, put the husband-wife names together and do a search. Now, I'm old school. You see those plus signs. Google doesn't use those plus signs anymore. I don't know. I usually use DuckDuckGo, but I don't know if they do or not. But I've always put it in there. I know everybody still uses a minus sign to leave it out, but I don't know that the place, but if you put two things in the search engine, obviously they're going to look for those two things. So you can certainly broaden your search by using Google instead of or a search engine than just using the genealogy sites. If you put something in quotes, you're only going to get what you have in the quotes. So if you put my name in as Susan Mueller and there was a whole lot of information out there as Sue Mueller, you wouldn't get it. So that there's times when you want to put something in quotes and there's times when you don't want to. Most search engines, the way that they make money is through ads, and some of their the places that you get for results are they come to the top based on the fact that it's an ad. They're usually plainly marked. That doesn't mean that it's not a good search result. It just means that this is why it's at the top, is because it's an ad. There's lots of free newspaper sites out there. Google Newspapers, Chronicling America, which is the Library of Congress site. Family Search has a nice wiki with links. More than half our states now have a historical newspaper website for the state, so that makes your searching a little bit easier. The Chronicling America site probably has the best darn search engine, but they're slow to process this. That's because they're waiting for money. They have newspapers from 1777 to 1963. Obviously, 1963 newspapers would still be in copyright, so they need permission to have more recent newspapers, and they're less likely to have, any site is less likely to have more recent newspapers because of the copyright issue. They do have an index of the available newspapers they have, and I tell you to look at that sometimes, just so you don't search for what doesn't exist on the site, because if there's a whole block of years that are missing, that's what you're interested in, then you're not going to find it there. They do have a really neat thing, though. They list all the newspapers that have ever been published in the United States from 1690 to present day, and they tell you where you can find it. So that's really nice if you're looking for a certain newspaper, and it'll tell you not only where to find it, but what format it's in. So whether it's on microfilm or what. Archive.org is a site where they're trying to digitize media. And sometimes it has census records, it has out of copyright materials. I'm not telling you to search for somebody on the census on this, but if you wanted to see a census record and you knew, like that for a certain place on a certain date, you could do it that way. You're probably going to use one of the other search engines for that, though. They have county and family history books, which were very popular. No, the county history books probably starting in the late 1880s up to about 1915, 1920. Family history books were usually written more recently than that, although there's some old ones for your family. You can download a full text of the book that's out of copyright, and it as a PDF, and it's fully searchable. The problem is if the quality of the copy is not good, your searching can be limited. They have a really interesting thing called a Wayback Machine, which in 1996 they started digitizing web pages. So if you had a web page that you liked that has disappeared, you can look on there and you can probably find it. They also now have a lending library where you can borrow a book as a PDF, and then when your time is up, your book goes poof. There are lots of subscription sites out there, and you may find some that you're really interested in, or you think, boy, if I could afford it, I'd really like to subscribe to that. Well, get on their mailing list, because they generally have free access times and they have discounts for new subscribers. They will email you and tell you when they have their discounts or when they have their free times. Of most of their sites, you can search for free, you just can't see the documents. They also have, sometimes you can look at the indexes for free, but you can always see what the site offers and decide then when you want to subscribe. And some of them have a free, they'll give you 14 days free so you can check it out. I mentioned social media. Facebook, there are all kinds of resources on Facebook. There are place name or topic groups. There's Family Tree Maker, a help group. There's an Ancestry.com users group. There's historical and genealogical societies. If somebody's trying to connect with their biological family and an adoptee, there's sites that'll help you do that. So there are all kinds of good things that you don't have to be on all the time, but they can be resources for you. I just want to mention about DNA that in general, there's some things you can learn from DNA, and there are things that the sites use their own database to tell you more information. So your results could depend upon the testing companies, what they have in their database. Now, I'm speaking from a genealogical perspective. It's what my interest is in DNA. So I want you to connect to a family tree. It can be very limited. Obviously, you only need to put in there the people that you are biologically related to. So, moms, dads, you don't need to put your brothers and sisters in there. You can just, do a straight line. But the other important thing for you to put in is place names, because sometimes when you're trying to solve a genealogy puzzle, you need to put two people in the same place at the same time, because the last I knew, that's the way babies were made. And to connect, to figure out who the person was that you're trying to identify as a parent. If you're interested in advanced DNA research, then the Family Tree DNA is the site for you, because you can do Y-DNA, you can do all kinds of things on there. If you're interested in doing genealogy research and matching, family trees and solving those kinds of puzzles, then MyHeritage or Ancestry is probably where you want to test. And 23andMe, you're least likely to find genealogy folks on that, because they started out, they wanted to tell you about health results, and that's what their focus is on. So the people who generally took that test are less likely to be involved in genealogy. And I just mentioned Living DNA because that's the United Kingdom ancestries or a DNA site. So I do want to mention that it's kind of hard for old people to do a spit test. So 23andMe and Ancestry both is spit. They may be harder for older people to do, although you don't have to do all that spitting in one sitting. So it's not impossible. Family Tree DNA and MyHeritage are cheek swabs. Now this, these numbers I'm not going to swear by these numbers, because these are the numbers of kits that they have sold. That does not mean that's the number of people in their database, but in general, Ancestry is about twice as big as 23andMe and 4 times as big as MyHeritage. And Family Tree DNA is much smaller. And GEDmatch is a site where anybody, you can take your raw DNA and you can post it on GEDmatch. So in theory, that would be the best place to go, because everybody could do that. But you can see people have not transferred their results to that. And of course, there's fear that some people don't want to do their DNA because they worry about privacy issues. All of these websites are selling your DNA. They are not selling any identifiable information with that. But the truth is that they are making so much money on the selling of your DNA, that they should be paying us to take their darn tests, but they're not. So in general, the tests are autosomal, which means they're testing, both sides of your family. But it'll allow you to connect with biological family. If you are a man, you could join a DNA project where they're exploring surnames. I have always been a money saver, so I would wait for sales. When I got my DNA test back in 2013, I think I paid, I can't remember whether I paid $39 or $49 for it. Those days are over. But attach it to a basic family tree, and then you own that DNA. You can download the raw data. You can post it on other sites. Sometimes they have free times when you can do that. Ancestry is the only site that never has doesn't even allow anybody else to post their data to Ancestry. The other sites will allow. The different results, which I mentioned, the DNA is the exact same, but the ethnicity, for instance, is determined by each company's own database. So the larger the database, the closer to accurate it's going to be. And you'll have different connections on the various sites. When I did that test initially, I had no German in me. I knew from my background that my mother's family had come from Germany. And now I am up to 28% German. So the results change your results don't change, that they are able to make those changes in what's accurate based on their own database. So I mentioned at the outset that your computer club, you might be interested in doing this. We have a genealogy special interest group, and we have a group all access subscription, which now costs the whopping $600. We also have the newspapers.com publishers extra tacked on that, which is worth, it costs $70. And then we have a Pennsylvania state tax on that. So it's a value of over $700. And we have 30 people who've joined that group. So it each costs them, their membership in the computer club plus that, which is a big savings. And why that works is because many of the people who are in that Ancestry subscription really have a casual interest. And the big users like myself, we have our own US Ancestry account, and then we just use it for the extra things that we need. No one camps on. Everybody understands that they have to log out. We have a instruction sheet for that process, and a member leader, that would be me, who collects the money and handles the paperwork. If you're interested in pursuing Zoom information, there's a a website called conferencekeeper.org that combs the internet for what's happening in the genealogy world, and posts that up, and they'll send you an email once a week with what's new. And that's all she wrote.
Great, great. I want to thank Sue for an excellent presentation. Let's all give her a sitting ovation.
Thank you.
And what's the name of the dog?
My dog is Riley.
Riley, we're going to have to add you to the participant list. I don't know how I'm going to identify you, but we welcome you too. As I told you, Sue really, if you look in probably in Webster's or in the Oxford OED, you'd probably see next to genealogy Sue's picture. That's how well known she is.
Sue?
Yes,
Yes.
go ahead,
Yeah.
Helene.
Okay, Sue, thank you. This was really very interesting. I want to say in 2001, I did the first genealogy presentation in the club. I spent a couple of years researching, and my father's, oh.
What?
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
It says I'm on low battery. I'm gonna, I'm just
You're
moving
fine.
over.
You're okay.
Well, she wants to plug in probably.
Yeah, I'm just plugging in. Just 1 second. Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
okay, all right. In my dad's side of the family, I have over 30 cousins, and I'm the oldest at this point. But in 2001, I had all of them come here to Florida from New York, California, all over for a 4-day cousin reunion. And I handed each one a portfolio of all the information that I put together on a website called myfamily.com. I don't believe they have that one now. And the programs they have now are more sophisticated. But I had all this information, and I had original birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates, and immigration papers. And I had all these, and I made copies of everything plus photos in the family. And I included all that in the portfolios. And so now it's not a cousin of mine, but it's a cousin's son who is in his 60s. And he has kind of taken over, and he's doing more research. And he set up a family tree that is really very interesting. And so there's a lot of information. But on a humorous note, I just want to say that my grandfather, that's my father's father, was from Austria. He had 2 sisters, 2 younger sisters. Each one had gotten married, and each one was divorced. And the 2 of them, after their divorces, moved to Argentina and opened up a brothel. They both became madams. And all this came up in the information I had. I found one picture that my parents had of 2 young women, and I didn't know who they were because their names weren't there. But on through a process of elimination, I determined these are the 2 madams. So, there is humor in it too. But everything worked out well. And to this day, my cousins question me on some of the things, events and things in the past that I bring to their attention. And I tell them, go to your portfolio, because there were only 35 cousins. But what I found, I made a family tree, and we had over 130 names on there. And also the last name, as you said, Sue, they could be changing names. The last name was changed several times, and I found all this. So anyway, I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention. It was 2001 that I did this presentation, and it was just, I recommend that everyone does something, because it brings up a lot of family history, and you pass it on to people younger who never knew about these things.
Thank you. Thank you, Helene. I appreciate your comments, but now I have a question from Judy Brown. We're moving a little late, so go ahead.
If I wanted to find out, if I know that my grandparents lived in Brooklyn between 1900 and 1910, is there a way to access the census for 1900 and 1910. And all I know is they lived in Brooklyn. How would I go about it?
That would be on Family Search. It's a free site that you could do that. There are also city directories that you might want to access. Some of those are online too. So that will give you the names of people old enough to work in the household too.
So I would go to Brooklyn?
Well, you could search by name and then that would,
Okay.
yeah, but yeah, Brooklyn is probably, all the boroughs, the city directory is probably not restricted to Brooklyn and looking at the city directory.
But there is a 1910 and a 1900 census
Oh.
that I can look up.
Yep, and the best thing about the 1900 census is it gives a month and a year of birth, and it's the only census that does that actually has a birth date on it. It asks how long you've been married. It asks how many children the women had and how many of those children are still living. So there's more information on the night. We love the 1900 census. It's our favorite one.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very
And
much.
Seymour, you'll be the final question before we close down.
Yeah, thanks for a very interesting presentation. I wonder, Sue, if you can recommend an application for writing up a family tree. That's more like an organization chart.
You
Do
mean
you have any?
well, all of the software packages will make that chart for you. I mean, however you want to do it.
I see.
They all have published abilities. I mean, you can handwrite it in you can print off a chart and handwrite it in too, but
Okay, I thought perhaps there was a particular one, which
well,
was
I use Family Tree Maker 2019, and I've used Family Tree Maker since 1995. Obviously, it's changed over the years, but so.
okay.
Okay,
Thank you very much. I'm
Sue, I
gonna
want to thank you so much for sharing today. I know it was a difficult thing. I'm glad that everything worked out well with you, I hope. And
Yep.
we wish you best of health and happy Easter if that applies.
Yeah. And thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Sue.
Okay,
That was great. Thank you.
bye now.
And if anybody has a further question, my email is on the handout.
Yeah, she's going to send me a handout, and you can look on the club site already. I put one, she sent me one for Jewish people that gives all the information.
I
And
didn't
it's-
send you the other one. I'll go right now and do that.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. Dawn, hurry up quickly. Dawn?
Sorry,
You're muted.
FAU has taken over on the 5th floor is all the Jewish history where they do recordings, have all the history and everything, if anyone would check that out. It is excellent.
Well, thank God, we actually heard Dawn today. We've had the most trouble, but we got all the audio issues done. Folks, I want to thank you for attending today. It's been wonderful. Wherever you are, I hope you remain healthy and safe. And in 2 weeks, if you look in your kitchen and if your refrigerator is saying something like, hey, it's time to change the milk because it's gone sour, or something like that, or your mixer is talking back to you and say, hey, I'm choking to death, too much flour, things like that. Home automation in the kitchen is a very interesting project. We'll even share some of our favorite recipes and things of that nature. So we're looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. That's April 21st. And following that on May 5th, I have gotten the Geeks on Tour to come back. We'll be probably doing another hodgepodge of their favorite tips and tricks, and you know how good they are. So everyone stay safe and well. And this is Barry Cowan of the Deerfield Beach Computer Club saying, oh, one more thing.
Turn off the recorder.
Sounds like Steve Jobs. Just one more thing. If you're looking for the article that I wrote for April, it's not in the CBE Reporter because I missed the deadline by 2 days. So the editor posted it on the CBE Reporter site directly. I'm working on the May article, but it's very hard to figure out what I'm going to do when I haven't done it yet. So it'll be sort of an update, and I hope that it will suffice.
Apology
Okay, folks,
accepted.
goodbye to each other.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. Turn off the recorder, Barry.
This will be posted probably by tomorrow morning, and I encourage you to leave comments underneath the video when it's posted. Sue would appreciate that. I'm sure all our guest speakers do, and also subscribe if you haven't done so to our YouTube channel. You can open any video, and in the right-hand corner, you'll see our logo and a red subscribe button. When you click that, it will add you to our list of subscribers for our site, which helps elevate our presence in Google and all the other search engines. So thank you again for attending, and see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Barry. Night.
Happy
Thank
Easter.
you,
Thank you.
Barry.